Well, good morning, and we're here today once again with Ken Peeders. Ken has been sharing with us about some hymns, some favorite hymns of ours, and we appreciate Ken being available. Ken, you're in Minnesota right now,
Yes,
and
we are.
what are we missing by not being in Minnesota right now?
Well, right now, I think it's 64 degrees outside. The temperatures are going to get up to 80, and it's this clear Canadian air that came down a couple of days ago and broke the heat, and we
Well, can you,
appreciate that.
if you have any left over, could you send some of that Canadian cool air down here?
Yeah, we'll package it. My new business.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Perfect, perfect. Well, Ken, we're glad to have you, and the last couple of sessions have been really good and beneficial. And now I'm very anxious to hear about what you have for us today. So what do you have in store for us today?
Well, we're going to look at "O Worship the King." And that's just a marvelous hymn. We've all kinds of traditions sing it, and written by Robert Grant, who was a member of Parliament in England and then became the governor of Bombay, India, during the colonial period. He died over there, but it's just got such powerful images and
Now,
biblical base.
let me back up a little bit for this Robert Grant. Did you say that he was a politician?
Yeah, he was a politician, and he was a parliamentary. He was a member of Parliament.
And so it was his official duties that brought him to India, not mission work of any sort.
That's right. Yeah, and apparently he did quite a bit of good work in a very short tenure. He died over there. He got ill and passed away, but was very interested in improvement of roads and things like that for the people. But this is the hymn that lingers for all of us.
Okay.
And I'd like to start with a story. I'm going to kind of hope that you've all had similar experiences. Norma and I went down to Arizona one trip, and we went to the Grand Canyon. And I remember walking out on that path out towards the canyon together on the south rim and coming around the corner, and there it was. And I spontaneously said, "Oh my." And it wasn't anything I thought about. It just simply happened. Oh my. And one other time we were in Italy, and we were going over to see the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And we got to the area, I couldn't see it, and I got out of the bus, and there was a big construction fence that we were walking along. And we came around the corner, and there it was. And once again, oh my, it just kind of came out spontaneously. And there is that sense in this hymn that Grant ties into that kind of spontaneous sort of celebration and wonder and awe. And you hear, it's a little word, sometimes a single letter, "oh." It doesn't have a referent, like the word pencil has a referent to something, or I run and it has a referent to something. It's simply a function word. And what it does oftentimes is express this sort of excitement or wonder or what have you. And we hear it in our national anthem, "Oh, say, can you sing?" or "Oh, Canada," "Oh, come, all you faithful," and hymns over and over, "Oh, the sweet, sweet love of Jesus." There's that sort of introduction that we're going to see in this hymn. And it occurs 4 times. "Oh, worship," "Oh, tell," "Oh, sing," and closes out with "Oh, measureless might." So that wonderful little word, that little "oh" that he uses here captures something, the tone of the poem and the tone of the hymn as we enter into it. And it is a kind of, it's a hymn of praise and a hymn of wonder and a hymn of thanksgiving. And it starts out with a kind of distant look at God, stepping back and worshiping him as he's up here and he's in his throne. And then it becomes personal, and we'll see that work through. And then he works it through with form and content, how the form of this poem supports the message and how the message supports the form. So I want to do a reading, but I think I'm going to take it a stanza at a time today. And then we'll work our way through and then do a closing. So if we open with the opening hymn, And as it appears on your text, it's 4 lines on your screen. Oftentimes it comes in as a split. So we say, "Oh, worship the King, all glorious above. Oh, gratefully sing God's power and God's love. Our shield and defender, the Ancient of Days, pavilioned in splendor and girded with praise." And you'll notice there's a kind of internal rhyme with king and sing and above and love, and that runs on through here. But the object of the poem, the object of the song is the King above, and the purpose of the song is a call to worship. And it's a call to worship in song. Oh, worship the King, and in a description of him, he's all glorious above. And then there's this call for each of us, oh, gratefully sing of God's power and his love. And then we get a series of names for God. He's a shielder, he's a defender, he's the Ancient of Days, and that comes from Daniel. I think that phrase appears 3 times in the book of Daniel, the Ancient of Days, which suggests something about timelessness. So he is ours, and he's a shield, he's our defender, and he's forever, from beginning to end, eternally, beyond beginning, beyond end. And then you have pavilioned in splendor and girded with praise. And we'll come back to those metaphors as we go on. And then the second stanza, again, is kind of an address to us. And it says, "Oh, tell of God's might and sing of his grace, God's grace." So you have, again, 2 attributes of God. Oh, tell of God's might and sing of God's grace. And I love that kind of juxtaposition, because grace is like a gift, a gentle gift to us, but it comes from someone who has might, tremendous might. So instead of exercising the might, God exercises this gift of grace. And he calls on us as singers to celebrate this. Oh, tell of God's might, oh, sing of God's grace. And then we get these images, again, we'll look at them later, whose robe is the light, whose canopy space, whose chariots of wrath the deep thunderclouds form, and dark is God's path on the wings of a storm.
Say, Ken,
Yeah.
as a thought occurs to me as you're reading through that, and I'm thinking of what you talked about, the juxtaposition of might and grace, and I'm just wondering, it's not so much a theological question as a logical question, and do you suppose it's true, and I'm just wondering out loud, but do you suppose it's true that grace is magnified proportionately to the might? In other words, if God were powerless, his grace might be less significant, but inasmuch as God is omnipotent, his grace becomes so much more magnified.
Absolutely. And and you end up having people write songs about amazing grace.
Mm.
And the amazement is that it's that juxtaposition. I'm reminded of the idea of cheap grace. I think it's Bonhoeffer that talks about that, but others do as well. And we cheapen grace when we don't realize our sinfulness, and we cheapen grace when we don't realize God's power.
Mm.
So there's this kind of knowledge of the holy, that Tozer talks about, that allows us to really celebrate grace. Grace becomes even more amazing as we consider these kinds of attributes in God. Yep, that's good. So we have, now look at what happens in 3. The earth with its stores of wonder untold, Almighty, thy power has founded of old, has established it fast by a changeless decree, and round it has cast like a mantle the sea. Now that's a little different stanza than I worked with. And honestly, I don't know where that one came from. It's supposed to be a different hymnal. But I want to look at number 4, because in my version, 4 is 3. Thy bountiful care, what tongue can recite? It breathes in the air, it shines in the light. It streams from the hills, it descends to the plain, and sweetly distills in the dew and the rain. The thy then becomes, if we think of thy as a personal pronoun, it's you. Your bountiful care, what tongue can recite? Your bountiful care breathes in the air. So he goes from talking about God in the third person, now it becomes personal. And he speaks to him directly. This God of might, this God whose robe is the light, whose canopy space, we can address personally. And it's personally addressed in stanza 4 in this particular version. Your bountiful care, what tongue can recite? It breathes in the air, it shines in the light, it streams from the hills, it descends to the plain, and sweetly distills in the dew and the rain. So midway through this hymn, Grant takes us to a personal discussion, a personal address to God himself, and we shift from that third person to the first person. And then we have this: frail children of dust, and feeble as frail, in thee do we trust, nor find thee to fail. Thy mercies, how tender, how firm to the end, our maker, defender, redeemer, and friend. And this stanza celebrates that mercy, God's mercy to us. And we get a series of names that are now really personal. We have now, he is our maker, my maker, your maker. He is our defender, mine and yours. He is our redeemer. And then we have, and friend. And that's that wonderful notion of Abba, the idea that we can talk to God that way, that God is our friend. Through Jesus, we can approach him as a friend. So now it's become personal. And in this stanza, it is about his mercy towards us. Now I have another stanza that I'd like to just read. And it kind of brings us back to the opening tone.
Can I break in again here?
Yep, you bet.
One of the things I've noticed, and I don't know, I wish I had a nickel for every time I've sung this hymn, but one of the things that I'm seeing as you're leading us through this is really this seems to be a celebration of God's power.
Yep.
Oh, gratefully sing his power and his love. He is pavilioned with splendor. We're telling of God's might, and then you get this the bountiful care. Well, what difference would bountiful care mean if God weren't powerful to provide it? If it was somebody who was meek and impotent that couldn't provide the care. So it, even in a backhanded way, that's sort of in praise of God's power. And then the juxtaposition 5, well, in the view of this powerful God, here are we, the frail children, as dust of
That's
dust,
right.
and feeble as frail.
Yeah, and how can we even sing about it? How can we even talk about it? What tongue can recite?
Yeah.
When we recognize that and acknowledge that. Now, there's a fifth stanza that appears in some of the verses, and it comes back to this idea of God that we establish in the opening, where you have this sense of wonder. And it reads as follows. He says, "O measureless might, ineffable love, while angels delight to hymn thee above, thy humbler creation, though feeble their lays, with true adoration shall lisp to thy praise." So he returns to the tone of the opening as he wraps up and sort of envelopes this whole hymn, completes the circle, and then we get this vision of measureless might, too great or too extreme, ineffable. That's a word we don't use very much today. But basically it says ineffable is something you can't even write about. In other words, you can't describe it. He goes ahead and tries, of course, but you have that picture running through. Now, just a couple of words about structure. There's a kind of, as I said, internal rhyme throughout this piece. "Well, worship the King" goes down to "gratefully sing." "Well, glorious above" goes to God's love. Then you have "shield" and defender takes us down to "splendor," and "days" and "praise." And that pattern appears throughout the stanzas. And in addition, you have a kind of a pattern of "worship the King," or "glorious above." Now, we don't emphasize it that way, but the rhythm is there. Or "worship the King," or "glorious above." And what I like to stress, just coming out of my background, is just for us to consider something here. This is a gift that's presented to the Lord and is given to us. I mean, I see it, the whole hymn, as a gift to God, as a vehicle of praise. And it is beautiful. In a sense, what you have is a rhythm through here, and you have a rhyme through here, and then the writer has to fit words into that pattern that carry the meaning that he wants to carry. And that's a challenge. And in all great poetry and all great hymns, that's one of the great challenges, and it's one of the most amazing things about it, is that God has grant this gift to be able to work with words so that they fit in that pattern of worship the King, O glorious above. They have a rhyme that appears over and over again for 5 or 6 verses, depending on what hymn you have, and they carry this powerful, powerful meaning. So
And
we have this, yeah.
are you familiar who provided the music for this text?
John Hayden, and I don't know if that's the Hayden that we Johann Michael Hayden was the name of the person who put the hymn together, and I don't know much about him.
He must have been Franz Joseph Haydn's younger brother or something.
Must have been, yeah, something like that, right? Germany it goes through. So you have these meanings have to fit, and then the pictures that the writer creates come from concrete comparisons. So if you're going to talk about something that you can't talk about, it's so ineffable. And if you're talking about God and you want to somehow convey to your listener and convey to the people singing some of the qualities of God, what you do is you use metaphors. You make comparisons. So there are a whole series of comparisons in here where he compares the unknown and the unknowable with things we know. So where is God? God's pavilion in splendor. So there's a structure someplace in heaven where God exists and sits, and we have we know what pavilions are like, and we can say God in that pavilion. He's girded with praise. That means he's kind of surrounded. He's just, it's a sense of a battle, a battle belt, if you will, that goes around his being. And we can visualize that, and we can make some sense of that as we look at it. He's dressed how? He's dressed in a robe of light. There's that metaphor. Where does he exist? His canopy, his roof is space, as we look at that. His wrath, if we want to know what his wrath is like, we compare it to the thunder of terrible storms, of which we've had several up here in the last few weeks. You get that picture. And you think about space, and then go out and look at we have the ability to go out and look at the comet up here. And this thing is going through, you can see it every night, twin tails, if you want to go out and take a look at it. And it's amazing. And then they tell us that there's such order in the universe that they're saying this thing's going to come back in over 6,000 years. And you say, wow, Lord, what a creation, what you have created. His care for us, it comes to us, it's breathed in the air, it shines in the light around us. The water streams from the hills, the water's the plain. And here is a clear echo you should be able to connect with of the Psalms. And listen to Psalm 104, and then you'll see how he has taken that psalm. Praise the Lord, O my soul. Lord, my God, you are great. You are clothed with splendor and majesty. The Lord wraps himself in light as with a garment. He stretches out the heavens like a tent, and he lays the beams of his upper chambers on their waters. He makes the clouds his chariots and rides on the wings of the wind. He makes winds his messenger, flames of fire his servants. He set the earth on its foundation. It can never be moved. You covered it with the watery depths as with a garment. The waters stood above the mountains. At your rebuke, the waters fled. At the sound of your thunder, they took flight. They flowed over the mountains and went down into the valleys to the place you assigned for them. You set a boundary they cannot cross. Never again will they cover the earth. He makes the springs pour water into the ravines. It flows between the mountains. He gives water to the beasts of the field. The wild donkeys quench their thirst. The birds of the sky nest by the waters and sing among its branches. Now there you can hear the echo in this hymn of David's psalm, of the psalm, of Psalm 104. And, C.S. Lewis has quite an essay on Psalm 104 in his book, The Psalms, where he points out that in pagan religions, these qualities are often attributed to a god. So you had the god of thunder, and the god of wind, and the god of love. But the psalmist and this hymn celebrates the God. It's the one that Paul talked about when he was in the Acropolis in Athens, when he pointed out these various statues, but he said, I'm here to talk to you about the unknown God, the God of above, the God of all, who is powerful and mighty, yet he deigns to come down and talk to us, and he's our Redeemer, he's our friend, and we can celebrate that. So we have this kind of juxtaposition that we've talked about. And then there's this wonderful irony in here. So he says this, he says, what bountiful cares, what tongue can recite? He says, well, the answer to that is nobody can. It's rhetorical. Then he says, the humbler creation, though feeble there lays. In other words, we create these songs of praise, but they're feeble. With true adoration, we sing them, but they lisp in thy praise. In other words, our praise is impacted by a lisp. So you've got that contrast of celebration of God in heaven and our celebrations. They're feeble. How can our tongues recite it? It really has the effect of a lisp, but this is a pretty good lisp, isn't it, this hymn?
Yeah.
And it's something that we can celebrate together as we celebrate the Lord's creation and then celebrate the fact that he is our personal Savior. He is our friend. He is our Redeemer and our defender.
Oh, that's terrific. Ken, we're going to be singing this hymn. That's going to be our lead-off hymn this Sunday. So it's really good that we're getting this kind of background on it, because it'll certainly add a depth and a richness to the words as we sing them together on Sunday.
We'll be singing with you
Great.
on TV.
Yeah.
In the morning.
Well, thank you for your time. Now you have some family up with you.
Yeah, we do. We are in the process of selling our home here at the lake that we've been in for 20 some years. And we have family from New Mexico and from down in St. Louis. They're up to be with us for kind of a final goodbye to the place. It's both sad and everybody understands it's time. It's a lot of work, a big place. But I will leave here saying thank you, Lord, for the opportunity to be here and then move on. And we still have Florida. We'll make our journeys down there. And then next week, I thought maybe we could do Guide Me, O Thou Great Jehovah.
Oh, that's a good one too.
It is, and it's often called a Welsh, sort of a Welsh national anthem. But it's a great hymn.
Well,
we'll be with you.
Hearing that.
Yeah, we'll be with you in worship on Sunday, all of you, and we'll be singing this hymn from our den. Very
good. Thank you, Ken.
You're welcome. Thanks a lot.
And we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Okay, take care.
And you too. God bless. Bye-bye.